Hey there, you know, the city teaches you to see everything as a puzzle. I spent my life untangling tangled knots of lies and motives. I thought I'd seen it all, but out here, away from the city's endless noise, the knots are different. They tied with old legends and local fears. People talk about ghosts, but I see a challenge. I believe in what a man can do when he is scared. This next case took me to a place steeped in grim history, an old, abandoned mill, a place where the wine carried not just dust, but the chilling echoes of a forgotten past. They called it haunted. I called it a damn good acoustic puzzle. The call came from a regional preservation society, specifically from a young, eager historian named Eleanor. Her voice, usually composed and academically precise, was now thin with a mix of academic curiosity and genuine apprehension. "Detective," she explained, "we trying to restore the old Blackwood Mill, a site of significant historical value, but the workers, they quitting in droves. They say it as utterly, undeniably haunted. They hearing screams. The Blackwood Mill was an imposing, decaying stone and timber structure nestled by a swiftly flowing river, deep in a valley that felt perpetually shadowed, even at high noon. It had once been a thriving lumber mill for over a century, a cornerstone of the local economy. Its massive water wheel churning out lumber that built homes across the territory. But it had fallen into disuse and disrepair decades ago. Its operations ceased after a series of particularly tragic industrial accidents. There were grim, well-known stories associated with the mill, workers caught in roaring machinery, boilers exploding in flashes of steam and metal, unfortunates dragged into the relentless current of the churning river. Local legend claimed that the tortured spirits of those who died violently within its massive, echoing walls were trapped there, condemned to forever replaying their final, agonizing moments. The mill was considered a cursed place, shunned by the locals for generations, its cavernous interior silent for decades, broken only by the ceaseless rush of the river and the mournful whine of the wind whistling through its broken windows. But now, with the preservation efforts underway, a state initiative to reclaim historical sites, the decades of silence were being replaced by something far more chilling than the clatter of restoration work. Workers, initially skeptical, man-hardened by years of manual labor, were reporting consistent, unnerving phenomena. They claimed to be hearing ghostly screams echoing from the empty, dusty floors, and the undeniable clanking, grinding sounds of long-dead machinery, even though all equipment had been meticulously removed decades ago, leaving only the bare framework. Some swore they heard disembodied moans, like men in agony, and the distinct sound of heavy chains rattling and dragging across stone floors where no chains remained. These weren't fleeting, one-off events that could be dismissed as imagination. They were consistent, unnervingly real auditory experiences, often occurring late in the day as dusk settled, drawing long, skeletal shadows across the mill's interior, or during specific, identifiable weather conditions. The workers, understandably terrified, were abandoning the project in droves, convinced they were disturbing truly restless, malevolent spirits. Eleanor, though a pragmatic historian, admitted she'd heard things herself, a distant, piercing shriek that seemed to come from the very walls, freezing her blood. I drove out there, leaving the persistent hum of city traffic behind for the stark, almost deafening silence of the valley, punctuated only by the roaring river. The old gravel road leading to the mill was barely more than a forgotten track. The mill loomed, a skeletal outline against the darkening sky, its broken windows like vacant, staring eyes, each pane a jagged hole into the building's bleak interior. The air was damp, cold, carrying the earthy smell of decay, wood stone, and the ceaseless, powerful rush of the river. I listened to Eleanor's meticulous account, her carefully researched historical data, and then to the terrified, whispered anecdotes of the few remaining workers, their faces pale even in the weak sunlight. I heard their tales of ghostly cries and phantom machinery, their eyes darting towards the vast, empty mill. I nodded, absorbing the fear that permeated the very atmosphere, but my mind was already dissecting the impossible. Ghosts don't clank machinery. Screams don't emanate from empty air, not without a source. I wasn't looking for spirits. I was looking for acoustics and vibration, for the laws of physics that govern our world, not hauntings. My initial investigation focused on the structural integrity of the mill and its immediate environment. The building, though derelict, was remarkably robust in places, particularly its main stone foundations and massive timber framework. These old builders, they didn't skimp. I noticed that the reports of sounds were most prevalent in very specific areas within the mill's cavernous interior near the old, empty turbine pit where the water wheel once turned, along a long, empty conveyor belt tunnel that stretched through the lower levels, and within the tall, empty grain silos that rose like stone chimneys into the air. I also paid close attention to the wind patterns. The valley, being narrow and deep, with the river carving its path, created a natural wind tunnel effect, channeling air directly towards and through the mill's various openings. And the river, a constant, powerful roar, created its own unique soundscape, a low, background drone that could mask or amplify other sounds. I had a team of acoustic engineers brought in, complete with specialized audio recording equipment, sensitive infrasound detectors to pick up sounds below human hearing, and vibration sensors. We set them up strategically throughout the mill, both inside and out, recording continuously, especially during the times and weather conditions when the hauntings were reported. We also set up anemometers, wind speed gauges, and barometers, pressure gauges, around the exterior, meticulously logging every atmospheric detail. The lab results, when they came back from the painstaking analysis, were fascinating, precise, and utterly devoid of anything supernatural. The sophisticated microphones picked up exactly what the workers described: piercing shrieks, guttural moans, grinding noises, and distinct metallic clangs. But the source wasn't spectral. The screams were a pure product of the mill's unique, deteriorated architecture and the well-known Venturi effect, a principle where fluid velocity increases as it flows through a constricted area, creating a drop in pressure. The old, broken windows and myriad gaps in the mill's massive timber framework, where glass panes or wooden planks had long since fallen out, acted like gigantic, complex flutes or whistles. When the wind, particularly during high-pressure systems or specific, powerful gusts channeled by the valley's topography, hit these myriad openings at just the right angle and speed, it created powerful, sometimes low-frequency, sometimes high-pitched, sound waves. These waves would then resonate within the large, empty, hollow internal chambers of the mill, the vast, empty processing floors, the echoing grain silos, the long, narrow conveyor belt tunnels amplifying them into an audible, piercing shriek that, to the human ear, primed by fear and folklore, sounded terrifyingly, unmistakably like a human scream. Each opening was like a pipe on an organ, playing a distinct, horrifying note. The clanking and grinding of machinery, that was a combination of resonance, harmonic vibrations, and subtle material friction. The old, heavy timber beams and rusty metal fixtures of the abandoned mill, no longer rigidly supported by working machinery, when subjected to specific wind speeds and subtle structural vibrations, perhaps from the constant rush of the river below, or even distant, imperceptible ground tremors, would resonate. Different parts of the mill, acting as giant sounding boards, would vibrate at different frequencies. Loose, rusted components, sections of the old, defunct conveyor belt system, or hanging metal chains from long-gone hoists, would rattle against their moorings or against each other in the powerful, channeled drafts. The very decay of the building, its loosened joints and rusted parts, turned it into a complex, self-playing instrument of eerie sounds, creating noises eerily reminiscent of old, defunct machinery grinding, clanking, and groaning under phantom loads. The metallic sounds were indeed from metal, but metal catching the wind just right, or rubbing against stone. This was no ancient curse, no lingering spirits of the dead seeking vengeance or solace. This was a perfectly executed, albeit entirely accidental and unintended, acoustic haunting, a chilling symphony of terror played by the wind and the decay of an old structure. The mill, in its grand abandonment, had become a giant, macabre musical instrument, playing the very sounds of its grim, industrial past, driven purely by natural forces. The human element was in the interpretation, not the creation. So, there you have it, the case of the echoes of the old mill. No tormented souls screaming from the afterlife, no phantom machinery grinding out its ghostly tasks. Just a grim, yet perfectly rational, testament to the strange and sometimes terrifying ways that nature can interact with neglected, man-made structures. This one, it always stuck with me because it highlights a fundamental human tendency to attribute the utterly unexplainable to the supernatural, especially when it fits a pre-existing narrative of tragedy or doom. Those workers, they weren't weak-minded or superstitious without cause. They were hearing genuinely terrifying sounds that, to the human brain, sounded exactly like the screams of the dying and the groans of suffering industrial accident victims. Their minds, primed by the mill's dark history and the chilling legends, simply filled in the blanks with the most frightening explanation available, solidifying their fear. It asks a chilling thought, isn't it, that the very air rushing through a broken window, or the unseen vibration of an old timber beam, can combine with the architectural quirks of a decaying building to create an illusion so potent, so deeply unsettling, that it can paralyze an entire community with fear. That the ghosts are just the specific acoustic properties of the wind, the unique resonance of a building as decay, meticulously played out by the immutable laws of physics. It relies on our natural human inclination to seek meaning, to connect dots, even when those dots are connected by pure coincidence and acoustic phenomena, not by spectral hands reaching out from the grave. For me, this case was a profound reminder of how deeply our environment can influence our perceptions, how easily our senses can be fooled when combined with the power of suggestion. It cemented the idea that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't spectral entities or cunning criminals plotting evil deeds. They raid the unseen and feeling forces of nature, amplified by forgotten structures, playing tricks on our senses and our beliefs. And when you factor in a history of profound human tragedy and loss, you've got a recipe for genuine, widespread terror, completely devoid of anything supernatural. It asks the ultimate, accidental haunted house. So, the next time you find yourself in a desolate, abandoned place, listening to strange sounds that seem to defy logic, pause. Don't jump to conclusions, no matter how thrilling or terrifying they might seem. Look for the small details, the specific way the wind blows, the structural integrity of the building, the presence of water or natural air currents. Because often, the true horror isn't some ancient spirit, it is the very real, very physical forces of the world around us, doing what they do in ways that can make our hair stand on end and our blood run cold. Until next time, stay curious, but always stay grounded. And maybe, just maybe, bring a good pair of earplugs to your next haunted room.